Hello, and welcome to this edition of B.E.P Talks, where we continue to bring you exciting guests from all industries, all professions, from all over the world, in fact, who come to share their beliefs, their experiences, and their passions with you, hoping to motivate, inspire, educate, even entertain, and they never ever fail. Um, I'm very excited about today's guest because she's going to share information about a topic that I truly want to learn more about, need to learn more about. So, with no further ado, please welcome today's guest, Tiffany Youngren. Here
Hello,
you are.
thank you for
Hello.
having me.
So happy to have you on BEP Talks for this edition, Tiffany. And as I said, so looking forward to this because I am so intrigued by much of what you do. And like many women, many successful entrepreneurial women, kind of multidimensional, you are an expert podcast coach. You are involved in real estate investment. You have your hand in different things, and yet somehow I feel that they somehow come together and can live side by side very synergistically. I believe in defining terms. Please define for us what a podcast actually is.
That is such a great question. And again, Ben, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. I am very excited about podcasting. I love sharing it with people. And it's funny that you asked what a podcast is. And I love that it's in the framework of, our beliefs. So, uh, this is so anybody listening right now, no hate mail, please. I know people get really passionate too about what a podcast is. When I say podcast, first of all, I think a podcast in its truest sense is an audio program that is released out to the world. However, over the years, that term has expanded. So sometimes I use language that I feel like people will understand versus like I don't have to be right. I just want people to know what I do. And these days, there are video podcasts. So the minute YouTube calls something a video podcast, being the number one search engine, I feel like they've been training people for years now that podcasting includes video. So when I say podcasting as it relates to anything I ever talk about, it could mean an audio program and it could mean a video program. Regardless, it is distributed online and in many, many ways. So I hope that
It
hope
does
that answers your
because,
question.
yeah, because that's the thing. No, it's audio. No, it's video. No, it's this. No, it's that. So I guess people who started in podcasting when podcasting started, it probably was more audio. And now, with more technology and people learning more and using it more, getting a little bit more familiar with the technology, the fact that it can be video. So, are we podcasting right now?
We absolutely could be. This feels like a podcast interview to me, so I feel very comfortable here. But I understand you distribute it over video. To me, it is what you want it to be.
Okay.
I never want to offend somebody. Especially as we're getting out there and you're branding and we've got messaging and all these things. When it's kind of one of those like, I don't want to judge it for you. Like, you tell me, is this a podcast? And I'm all for it. And if it's not, that's fine too. Sometimes people on video, if they have a video show, they're offended if I start to insinuate that it's a podcast. But ultimately, I think it's all good.
It's all good. It's all good. It's
Yeah.
all about communication. And as long as we're getting our message across effectively and efficiently, I guess there's nothing bad about that at all.
Not
But
one
I
bit.
think today I'm experiencing more video podcasting.
Well, and don't people want to see video more? I mean, TikTok is huge, the medium in itself. I mean, and YouTube, when my father-in-law in his 70s is going to YouTube to figure out how to do something, how to fix his Jeep or something, it is really everywhere. It has officially,
Right.
gotten everywhere.
It's
So, yeah, I think
multi-generational. Yeah.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think if podcasters are eliminating video, the podcasters I work with, I pretty much insist that they do video because they're just leaving so much on the table. They're missing out on a huge population of people in any demographic if they're eliminating video.
Right. And I think the opportunity that technology now gives us, such as we're experiencing today, um, a stronger connection. It's multi-sensory. You're hearing, you're seeing, there's body language that's involved, there's facial expression, all of which I think are part of good, effective communication skills and help to make sure that you're actually focused on the right message. And I know for me,
Absolutely.
if it were just audio, it would be easy for me to get distracted to something else. Probably something on TV because we crave that video.
Absolutely. And, on the flip side, you're 100% correct. I mean, these days we can have meetings on video and I feel just as close. There is the personal thing when you're in person, but being able to meet with someone across the country
Yes.
and in a way that we're really being able to connect, like you said, with the body language. However, I also would not want to ignore the fact that people who listen to podcasts on the ride to work, on the drive to work,
Yes.
or,
Yes.
there's just so many use cases for audio being a more portable way to, when I'm working out, I listen to audio, whether it's an audiobook or whether it's a podcast. And it's so intimate when it's audio. Like if someone's just listening and they're doing
Mm,
something else, it really creates, I mean, you think about it, when you're doing something and learning at the same time, sometimes I'll go and do that same thing, and I'm thinking about the last thing I was thinking when I was doing that before. So if I'm, you know, on the treadmill running, and then yesterday I was listening to a book and today I'm not, it pops that chapter into my head. So we're able to really get into people's mind in a
mm.
lot more intimate way through audio as well. So I really think both are amazing. And
Yeah.
podcasting is awesome because you can hit both and with today's technology, so easily and nearly on autopilot. So even the busiest people, and I think busy people make the best podcasts. So even the busiest people can really be able to do it without having a really heavy load like in the old days,
Yeah, that's a
5 years
really
ago.
good point because I guess with video, things can be distracting. Oh, what's in the back? Oh, that lampshade is crooked. There can be some distractions. So you make a really good point about the intimacy of just the audio. So is it possible for one person to put out a podcast in both mediums?
Oh, yeah, and they should, quite
They
honestly.
should.
I'm all for, you're spending this time and energy and effort and brain power and emotion and taking, when you're budgeting time and you're busy, it means you're not doing something else. And so if you're using this valuable time to create this content, then yes, it absolutely should be used in both mediums.
Again, very, very good point. So is there are podcasts as the podcaster more popular among women?
It's been a while since I've looked up those stats. It's always pretty even when I look them up. I mean, I've been watching them over the years and, it when it bumps, it's typically pretty close to men and women. It's usually educated people. Again, podcasting statistics are really tough too, so I don't, take them in, hugely, but I can say that people, you can watch what people are consuming on TikTok, and I feel like usually it's kind of the same relevance when it comes, you can transfer a lot of that over to podcasting. Although podcasting with the listening side of it, because a lot of people do it while they're driving or doing it
Yes,
while they're
yes,
working
yeah.
out, there is a little bit of a demographic that's historically been more educated, higher, excuse me, income sometimes. But again, that changes. And, you know, one
I guess
year
the
to the
subject
next.
matter the subject matter would change that, I imagine. Yeah,
Yes, yeah. As a podcaster, it's important to know your audience. So the more podcasts that are out there, the more audience that's getting brought in too. So that's a
sure,
really
sure.
good point that
So how
subject
difficult
matter.
is it to start a podcast?
It is easy to start a podcast. It requires more effort and work and time to create a podcast that is sustainable because most podcasts quit before 3 episodes. And, like, they're 82% quit before their 10th. So it's, you know, it's you wanna if you're gonna do it at all, make sure you do it in a way that is sustainable, and a lot of that has to do with the same thing if you're starting a business. You wanna know who's your audience, what's your vision, what are your goals, what do you wanna get out of podcasting, and then you go from there into, "Okay, well, this is who I'm talking to, this is what I wanna get out of it," and then you start creating what is the content? Who will I be interviewing? How
Mhm.
will I do this? And then from there, the functionality of it is very simple. But having that confidence coming into it because you've set the groundwork, what I call the foundation,
Sure.
then you have a much greater chance of really having it be not only sustainable, but a lot more enjoyable.
Sure. Like anything, it's what you put into it is likely what you're going to get out of it. So make the commitment. Why do people want to start a podcast?
Typically, it is to gain influence, right? So, and I call them wannabe podcasters. Like people are like, I want to start a podcast. It's typically because either they want to just share something, they have some idea of content that they want to put out there that they think people will enjoy, or they're like, I want to build my brand. I want to grow my influence. I want to more people to know about what I do. And I want to, then it grows into like, wanting to bring in this content that everybody wants to hear. So,
Right.
for example, I had I do these 6-week challenges with new podcasters. And in the last group, I mean, we had the bulk of them wanted to really build their business on it, but they had great content also. And then we had a couple people who've been in business a long time and they had a heart to help in certain ways. So they didn't necessarily want to grow their businesses, but they wanted to either help people or bring this really specific content because they thought it would help people. But one thing I do say, and this is probably it sounds terrible, but
Mm.
I I truly believe that if the only reason you want to start a podcast is to help people, that you really need to dig deeper. And this is huge because everybody like if I'm at a party, if I'm anywhere, people are like, I really want to start a podcast, but I just really want to help people. And I'm always like, you have to really identify your why. Like, why do you
Yeah.
want to help people? What is it? So what? That excitement that you have is exciting now, but what will help you keep that podcast growing and interesting at all is to really understand um why is it that you want to help people and what is it in it for you. There has to be a what's in it for you. This
Yeah.
altruistic, oh, I just want to help people, it just doesn't last. And every time I see someone try it, it hurts my guts because I feel like you could actually help more people if you continue your podcast, but because you didn't do the work to say, what am I getting out of this? Whether it's, I don't have any other way that I'm helping people. And so in a year, I want to know that, 10 people reached out to me and said, you helped me this week. But you have to have something that's the payoff.
You
Otherwise
do.
we're
You do.
human beings. We're not,
Yes.
robots
Yes.
who can
There
do
always
these
has
things.
to be an ROI.
Yeah.
Not always a quid pro quo, but there has to be some give and take in any relationship, even if it's as a podcaster. Is the podcast more about you, the podcaster, or the guest?
I love this. I'm so passionate about guests on shows. So when I do a podcast, I have what I call my white glove strategic guesting system. And it is all about making the whole process with the guest, just treating them like gold because I really treasure the guests that I have on my show. Now, there is this whole influence transfer that happens. So if I have you on my show and you come on my podcast and I interview you, even if I don't know anything about your topic, because I was on a podcast with you and you were talking about it and you have an authority over it, then it actually transfers to me. And there's like a whole psychological thing that happens with that. But fundamentally, there is this influence transfer. So as a host,
Hmm.
you get a huge amount of benefit by bringing on guests that are experts. So it's really nice to have guests that are a good fit within your world. So like let's say someone wants to have a podcast about what's a good example? So I had a podcaster who she lives in New York and she wants to bring up really interesting topics so that people are talking about things and maybe they agree, maybe they don't. So she has on some philosopher who comes on and she has a conversation with, well, she is kind of a philosopher, but by trade, she's not. She's a real estate agent. So she has this person on, but suddenly she is, it transfers. It's like she's having this really philosophical conversation with this person who's an authority in that space. So it doesn't have to be about the host, but as a host, you're having that conversation, you're asking really good questions. And so from the host perspective, it should primarily be about the guest, but you are the one that they're trusting to run the show. So you also have to hone your skill. You have to really know what you're doing. So you need
Sure.
to, for example, we have with everybody that I work with, I have what I call like my winning interview blueprint. And so we go on like this is how the show should typically go. Now, each one of my podcasters, they have their own topic, they have their own questions, but there's a flow. And sometimes when they start, they're really timid about like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have this guest and they know all these things and I have to know all it's like you do not have to know more than them. You just have to be curious and then follow that format. And they're going to be grateful to you by the end, going, wow, thank you. You took me on this really great journey. And so it's just podcasting to me is like the most amazing thing for that reason. And that's the number one reason that I am mostly in real estate, but I help podcasters because I feel like it's just a really magical opportunity to meet people you would not otherwise meet and build actually lifelong friendships.
Yes, it makes good sense. So, does a podcast need to be thematic? Does it need to always be about the same topic? You mentioned real estate. So, as a podcaster, do you feel that it's most beneficial only to specialize in having guests who are in real estate, or is diversity of topic from your guests more beneficial for the podcaster?
That's a really good question. When you establish that you're going to have a podcast and you know what your vision is and where you want, another thing that we do is we develop what I call an audience promise. So as you're getting on your podcast or whatever messaging you have going out, you always want to include like as a listener, this is what you can expect. And so if I have a podcast, okay, let's just take real estate for example. Um, if I have a podcast where I know I want to tell I want to show brand new investors, like this is how you invest in real estate. I can have people who are brand new real estate investors on the show. I can have people who are bankers because like all these things are threads that hold the topic together. If I tell someone that I'm going to show them how to invest in real estate, there's a lot of trades that are included in that.
Sure,
There
and just any
and
consumer, any citizen.
Exactly.
Sure,
Another
sure.
example, I had my most recent podcast was called Next Step Nation, and I interviewed podcasters, and they had to have released at least 20 episodes because I felt like they're past pod fade. I want them on my show, right? But I didn't only interview them. So first I did a set of 12 what I call my master class. So I did just kind of a series. So sometimes I'll do series. I did 12 interviews with like top people in the podcasting industry and asked them. It was very well rounded. So it covered all these different topics in podcasting. So I ended that and then I had a couple podcasters who kind of crashed and burned in podcasting and
Mhm.
had a hard time, which I thought was helpful and for them, and they were trying to like get back with it. So it's like, how do I get back with it when I've lost my oomph? And then my final part, and most of the episodes are this, but I did hot seat series. So I interviewed podcasters and, talked about, gave them actionable steps, learned about their podcast. I listened to their podcast ahead of time. So really, whatever your vision is, you can create programming, it needs to be programming specified by what your outcome is and what kind of content you promise to your
So you
audience.
before a podcast airs, and I don't know if they're live or not, do you promote the topic to draw the audience specific for that topic?
Yeah, I love that question. So when we're releasing a new show, so anytime we have like a new podcaster, the biggest thing is I want podcasters to have 12 episodes in the can before they release. And one of the things that you can do that is really powerful is release multiple episodes as soon as you release. So, and I've done, 1 episode on my release, I've done 4 episodes on my release, and I've done 6 episodes on my release. And definitely 6 episodes had the most listeners like right from the jump. And which obviously like there's more content, there's more SEO. If I promote it, I have all these different so it looks like I'm established. But I also think you could do that with as few as 4. So when you have 12 in the can, then you can actually release that first batch, schedule out the others, and then still have time to just be, recording more. So you're never under the gun and needing to do it. In the meantime, once you have 12 in the can, that's when you're kind of released to go, okay, let's start. I've got a ton of content to start promoting. And so exactly what you said, then it's, kind of, especially as hosts, there's so much to do to prepare for a launch. You're getting your interviews, kind of down, you're getting your comfort zone kind of going. You've got, interviews, lined up for the future. And so then it's like you're freed up to go, okay, I'm ready to either bring on a VA and start some
Right.
kind of a marketing blitz, or I'm going to do it myself, which if you're busy, it's not, probably don't do it that way. But whatever, however someone chooses to do it, it gives a lot of freedom to do that because you already have those first few episodes
And
recorded.
that makes sense. Yeah. So we spoke earlier about, oh, I just want to help people, which hopefully we all want to do that. That
Yes.
is what we all should be doing.
Yeah, I'm
You
all
don't
for that.
I'm all, you don't have to have a podcast to help people. You
Yeah.
should just be a nice person. Um, and we agreed that there needs to be an ROI on it. And the ROI can be wide and varied. It can be, of course, self-satisfaction, branding, becoming an influencer. But I've heard that there are many podcasters who have been able to monetize their podcasts to a rather healthy point. How does one monetize their podcast?
Well, there are a lot of ways to do it. There's one path that I've always taken and that I teach actually, and that is to monetize within the first 12 recordings. So before it even releases, building collaborations has been the most powerful way that I've gotten ROI. And I will tell you too that it's been both monetary, but it's also been where I've been invited to speak at Engel and Voker's partner
Oh,
meeting down in Florida. Like, it could be literally anything, but understanding who you're bringing on to your podcast as guests. And we are really strategic about it, as well as white gloving it. We also are strategic in the way that, if people want a podcast because they want to attract clients, why not have potential clients on your program? Good example, that show I just mentioned where I had these hot seat series. So then we've got this really good way of gently going like, hey, does it make sense if we talk more about what your needs are? And if it's a no, it's a no. But usually by the end of a podcast where you've interviewed somebody, you have a really good relationship with them. You've treated them great all along the way. They
mhm.
know you're going to ask. I always tell them before the show, it's like I've got a couple selfish questions right after we record that I'm going to ask you. Does that sound okay? They actually get told that before they book the call. So even before they book it, they know that that's one of my takeaways is I get a few selfish questions right after we record. And And I've been able to, I mean, and it's really more than just monetary. And that's why I say it's building a profitable, those interviews turn into profit, but they also turn into life changing relationships. In
relationships.
fact, one of the people in my last podcast challenge was somebody that was on one of my, I did interview her on my real estate podcast. And that was, I think, 5 years ago. So, I mean, she's just someone that was like, oh my gosh, you showed up on my feed. I saw you. But we have this connection, and and I have a true fondness with most of the people I've interviewed.
Right, no,
Anyone who got the invitation where I'm like, hey, does it make sense for us to have an appointment right after? Any one of them I thought were awesome. But remember, I interviewed real estate agents all over, so some of them I
right,
didn't
right.
invite. But
So time-wise, what's the frequency of putting out a podcast?
well, the more the better is really the quick answer, but I will say that, for again, back to sustainability, when you're starting out, just like monetization, you can't, it's pretty difficult to make as much as everybody we hear about that makes all this money
Yeah,
without, tens of or hundreds of thousands of listeners. And you'll get there if you can sustain it now. So if you can kind of push that off. But I always recommend once a week, because
okay,
that's frequent enough for people to rely on you and remember they rely on you. I know sometimes people have once a month, and whatever it is, just keep it consistent. So if it's
consistent,
once a month or once a week,
right.
but I do know of a couple examples that they did it once a week until they reached a certain point and they were able to hire more help, and then they increased their frequency to twice a week. And then they hired more help, and then they increased it to daily. So now
Sure.
it's a daily show. So,
So it clearly sounds like it can become a very full-time job.
well, I mean, for me, it's never a full-time job. It's always, but it really depends. For me, I automate a lot. And then whatever's not automated, I have really clear procedures that if I hand it off to a VA, they can easily break it up. Now that we have AI, breaking
Yeah,
one video, one recording up, like you could take this recording, and I just tested 6 different solutions that do that very thing where they break it up into different contents, or different segments. And I mean, that takes minutes. It's just, and then you have to post it. So, but we have a scheduler, so we can turn around and then put
so, like, each question that I've asked can be its own little segment.
yeah, if you have time to go through and edit it yourself, you could do that. But what I typically do, I'll take that recording and I'll upload it to one of these AI software, and it'll just pull out little clips. So it won't even necessarily have the question. It'll just be like, hey, some brilliant thing that either I or my
Okay,
guest
gotcha.
said, and then we put it out there, and then usually you can edit it. So if you watch it and you're like, oh, it feels like something got cut off, then you can actually expand it, which is way quicker than, I used to have VAs who they wrote like the timestamps of when the clips would be and things like that, but
I've
it
seen
takes a
that.
really higher level VA to be able to, really be creative like that. And then the rest of the VA team would physically, edit up the thing. So I don't have the time to just sit and do all that editing. So for when I start out a new podcast, I start with the AI and then I move on to having an editing team.
I've got you. Okay. Okay. So be consistent. And when you can decide what that is, you can grow more slowly or more quickly, depending on your choice. Is You mentioned earlier, you mentioned TikTok. We have YouTube, which has become, such a platform. Those tend to be shorter, if I understand correctly. I'm not a tech person, but they tend to be shorter. Podcasts tend to be longer. Is that one way to differentiate them?
Yes, but I highly recommend using TikTok to promote your podcast. So if you have a full-length podcast that you put on YouTube, those clips that I was just telling you about should go onto YouTube Shorts. They should go onto TikTok so that you're getting a lot more views, a lot more exposure that to people that can be then watching your full length if they're liking that content.
Feel like in the makes sense. So I understand the opportunity to build relationships and collaborate with experts in other areas. Um, that's always wonderful. But what's the secret sauce for actually financially monetizing your podcast?
The biggest thing, and eventually, like I said, there's a difference between starting out a podcast and then having tens of thousands of viewers. In the beginning, find a way to monetize collaborating with guests. My way has always been that anywhere from 50 to 70% of your guests to be your dream clients. So you have your listeners who are your like ideal clients or, some group of that, but then your guests are really just like dream clients that it needs to be measurable. For example, when I had my real estate podcast, I was helping real estate agents do marketing, right? So I was helping them market, get their name out, all that kind of thing. So I went and was very proactive. I went out and looked for real estate agents who produced more than 20 million. They help people buy or sell more than $20 million worth of real estate in the year. And then I, had a VA make a list of those people, their contact information. So I had about 1,000 on my list. And
Wow.
so I would literally, and at the time, not a lot of people knew about podcasting. It was before COVID. So nobody knew how to do Zoom. Zoom was super confusing to everyone. And real estate agents, especially successful ones, are difficult to get through to if you are a marketer. And so I made this list and and again, my whole system's just based on what I've learned. And this was actually the biggest impact of my outreach that helped me. But they get invited with an email, invited with an email again, still nothing. And then I would send them a note card. And
Oh,
then after that, I would send an email, being careful not to send text until they're like opted in and things like that. And, but after that note card, then they were like, "Okay, is this a real person? I thought you were,
well,
just spamming me. I get 1,000 phone calls a day from marketers. What do you want? What's this all about?" And so then I'm like, "Yes, I'm a real person. Would you like to be on my podcast?" And once I get that far, I'm in, right? And so then it was a matter of, in our system beyond the podcast afterwards, we're asking like, I would ask them, "Do you know other real estate
sure.
brokers or agents who produce more than 20 million a year?" And they're like, "Of course I do," because they always do, right? And so then, at the end of every interview, I'm capturing a testimonial. And so
Right.
these emails had testimonials and then it just snowballed. But, these agents, when I did my selfish questions, because I was very upfront, I wanted, I don't want to know aha moments, right? I just want everybody to know what's happening. And so I'd say, I'm going to have these selfish questions. And then I would ask them, first I have like a couple other questions I ask that have nothing to do with, working together. But, we'd built a relationship to where I felt comfortable to say, "Hey, we just did this, but I'm a marketer. Would it make sense for me, or what's your biggest challenge?" So I always ask like the
Right.
first question. So what's your biggest challenge in real estate? And then I'd say, "Well, would it make sense for us to have a conversation after this? I know you're really busy, so let's talk about this another time." And then 80% of the time I got a call booked before I was even off the interview. And so I was able to get, high ticket, I usually did strategy calls. So I was able to set up like their whole marketing strategy and things out of that. So I legitimately was able to get clients from that.
Beautiful.
Also, I got asked to do that talk, like I was telling you about. I went in front of England Wilker's Partners down in Florida and shared about podcasting, and then was able to get a lot of, leads from that. So I don't think I recorded more than 50 episodes of that. And honestly, I get a lot more revenue based on just the relationships that I make with my client, with my clients, with the people I interview than I do with
Yeah,
anything
yeah, when
else.
you share that information, that's what. So you mentioned your program. Explain if someone were interested, and I know we have people listening who are interested in starting a podcast or understanding more about it to help make a prudent decision. What is your program?
Well, the very first step is probably not shocking. It's called the foundation. I do have software and services that support a sustainable podcast, but the first thing I just want to make sure everybody's got that foundation built. And so we have a super affordable foundation program it's a challenge. So within 6 weeks, you'll have your vision, all that really important work. Why do you want to do it? What would monetization look like to you? And then how can we get that done while you're doing these initial interviews? Then we go through, the setup. I know a lot of people want to know, like, how do I set up my studio? In fact, I'm redoing my whole setup. I partnered up with someone that I took training from, who also is providing some information on like exactly how to set up a studio. And then I go through my winning interview outline, give it away, and talk about how they could revise it. So we really go through all the steps to help them have a sustainable, successful podcast, so that by the end of the 6 weeks, it's like, okay, let's talk about guest management. Let's talk about promotion. What happens next? And by the end of the 6 weeks, usually people don't have 12 in the can, but we do Q&A that I offer after the 6 weeks that, they can come on, ask any questions, because I'm just like driven to have 12 in the can for everyone,
Everyone,
and then do
yeah.
whatever I can to support it. But those first 6 weeks, that foundation challenge is really the first step.
And so below this video, there's going to be a link so that you can connect to Tiffany's foundational challenge, which is 6 weeks, you said,
Yep.
and explore it, test the waters, talk to an expert like Tiffany. Nothing is right for everybody, but this might just be right for you, and it might be worth it to try it. And I have to say that for so many women of the GSEW, the Global Society of Empowered Women, which promotes B.E.P talks, there's so much wisdom, there's so much life experience, so much educational value, that there's so much to share. Share it. Excuse me. I got a little
Absolutely.
choked up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think there's so much out there, and I want to do whatever I can to help people do that. So,
Well,
for sure.
B.E.P talks is all about beliefs, experiences, and passions. Clearly, you bring all of that to our listeners and viewers. Your belief is so strong. You have fabulous experience, and your passion comes right through. So,
Thank you.
thank you. That is wonderful.
Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, it's been great to get to meet you, and truly for myself, I'll speak just for myself as a listener, to learn so much more about it. It's one of those catchphrases that people refer to it, and I'm always about defining the terms, which is one of the first questions I asked you, and say, are we all having the same conversation? Are we all starting at the same place, looking to go in the same direction together? Because you find that there's a lot of assumption. There's a lot of times that people misunderstand the vernacular of anything, of
Mm.
anything. And for me, I've learned with my coaching with women, too many women who don't say, wait a minute, what are you talking about?
I
So
love
I'm
that.
always very upfront about saying, define the terms. Let's start from the same place and know which direction we might be able to go together. So you brought so much clarity to that. Um, Clearly evident why you were so successful in podcasting and how you have created a wonderful system to help
Mm.
others experience their own success.
I
So I invite
appreciate it.
everybody to go to the link that is below and reach out to Tiffany directly, get to know her better, share whatever conversation you need to share with her to see if you fit well together, if you're at a good starting point to move forward. So I thank you
Awesome.
so much, Tiffany. I have so
Yes.
enjoyed learning. And I did learn a lot. I said that I
Good.
was one who, yeah, who needed to know more about it. So I
Well,
thank you.
thank you, Beth. I appreciate it so much. It's been
But
really fun talk. Obviously, it's my favorite topic, so I appreciate
I
being
get
able to
that. I
share
see
it.
how you went right up. So then let me ask you, I asked you at the beginning, is this a podcast? So was this a podcast?
Again, it's really, as the creator and the visionary, you tell me, is this a podcast? Like, do you, ultimately, one thing I would say is, are you going to be releasing this across audio as well as video, or is it simply video?
No, it's audio and video. That's why
I would
we
call it
do
a
it.
podcast personally.
Oh, good. I did a podcast. Well, thank you so
But
much.
again, it's up to you. The visionary gets to pick. So
Okay, well, I'm the visionary. I will pick. So, as we always say at B.E.P Talks, may the best always be yet to come. Truly, that is my wish for everyone. And if podcasting is something in your vision, in your strategy, even if it is as a legacy project, to share what you have already learned and know so well, and want to use that as a way to help others follow you in a career path, in a profession. What a generous way to keep your own brain going and to be sharing that wisdom. And as you said, I just want to help people. So a podcast is a great way to help people. So thanks everybody for listening and for watching. So until we talk again, may the best always be yet to come. Tiffany, thank you so much again.
thank you, Beth.
Bye for now.